Hello, today I am going to show a demo regarding Blazor in .NET. But before going into demo, I will mention few important things that you should note about regarding Blazor. So what is Blazor? Blazor in .NET is an interactive UI framework like SPA. So earlier we developed SPA application with React.js, Angular, and there we used JavaScript in the front end and any backend language in the backend like C# or Java. But in Blazor, we can also develop an interactive UI framework like single page application using C# language, both in front end and backend. So what is SPA? We all know that single page application is an application where you don't need to refresh your browser, refresh your page. Without refreshing, you can show your data fetching from backend and do any operation on fly. So execution, Blazor runs on server or also in browser or client as well. For example, when Blazor runs on server, it uses signal R, and when it runs in browser or client, it actually runs via WebAssembly. So I will show a demo regarding WebAssembly today, that I will create a project with WebAssembly Blazor framework, and then we'll show you how to fetch data from the backend API. Interactivity, Blazor is real-time. It is component-based updates without reloads like React, and via signaler on the server and WebAssembly in the client. Logic, Blazor uses C# on both client and server. Unlike React or Angular, where those frameworks use JavaScript in the client and C# or any other server languages on the server. But in terms of Blazor, it uses C# on both client and server. File extension for Blazor, .razor is the extension because it creates Razor components to do the operation like React, where we can write logics and also display data in our web page. I'll show you in the demo shortly. Rendering model, Blazor allows Razor components to update the browser DOM dynamically. When to use? We'll use Blazor when we need high performance interactive dashboard, share C# code between the front end and back end, and we don't want page reloads, as I mentioned earlier with SPA. So now I'm going to straight into demo. First of all, for the demo, what I did, I created a simple API application where I did nothing fancy, just created a static course array, and it will return the courses. In the real world, in the real project, you will get your data from the database. You will create a service, you will inject the service, and with the use of service injection, you will actually fetch your data and use the API controller to interact with your front end. And this interact API will be called from the front end. So here, I kept simple course array, and it will return the course. So first, what I did for this, actually, a few things that I want to show you. I actually installed packages for Swagger Gen, Swagger UI. So you can install packages like NuGet Package Manager, manage NuGet packages for solution, and there you can actually type what you want to install. I have already installed Swagger Gen, Swagger UI, and Open API is already installed when you created the API application. So how I created this API? So you can create a project, click on ASP.NET Core Web API, and you can also search here. And when you click next, you will fill up all the information in the dialog box, and next, and you will check or uncheck. I kept the default settings and click create. After creating, I have installed the required packages Swagger is needed when you run the application, web API application. You can actually verify your APIs in the browser with Swagger UI. And in the program files, I actually injected the Swagger service, this one at Swagger Gen, and here the use Swagger and Swagger UI in development section. And this is the course service, so that you can avoid course origin resource sharing, because when you call the API from the front-end application, the front-end port and the IP can be different from the back-end API and port. So by default, the request is rejected. So to allow the request from the particular front-end application, you have to actually allow to access the API and use this course. So there's course origin resource sharing restriction does not prevent you from accessing the API. This is the origin of my front-end application. I'll show you a little later. So, and finally use course. This is, I have you set the name here with this origin URL. So if I run this application API now, you see that after running this, because this API is running on this port, localhost 7141, here it is the same 7141, and after that you will go to this URL and you will see all the available APIs that are being used in this API application. For my demo, I will use this API only, so I can check the API here. If I execute this, it will return this JSON with course ID and course name. Okay, I have run the API application. I will keep it running, and now I will go to my Blazor frontend. This is my Blazor frontend application. Here, before running the application, I will familiarize you with few files and briefly tell you what the files will do. For example, for the course, I have created the course.razor. This is a component like React component. So here I have added a button with an on-click event, and when you click on the button, it will call the onGetCourse function, and that function is declared and written inside the code section. And this is the function. It will actually use the client HttpClient factory and call your API and retrieve your courses, and that courses will be displayed in the browser. And the API I already I have already shown you. This is the course controller, and here is the API and the controller name. And if you run this controller, since there is no additional route for this particular function with annotation, when you actually access API/course, it will call this method. So to call the API, I need to do something. First of all, in the program, I have added and injected the client for base address. For example, here I have actually added an HttpClient, injected this and named it Web API. This is a named HttpClient for my own Web API, and base address is the address of the API. That is this one. HTTP localhost 7141, and I have declared a course model, and in the component, course component, I have actually referenced those models and the client factory. So if I run this application now, It is loading. The first time, the WebAssembly Blazor application, what it does, it actually loads all the dependencies and .NET runtime in the browser. And then we can actually load our data and in the browser without refreshing the page reloads. So this is the course. This is another API called. I will discuss about this later. Now I'm talking about the get course here. If I click on the get course, it is actually fetching data by accessing the API without refreshing the page. We haven't done any page reloads here. It is acting as a single page application. And there are a few other files in the layout. In the nav menu, for example, I have this menu. It is a menu where I clicked and it went to the page course API. It is going to the component here. It is defining the course API and it is showing this. So here you see that in the same page I have the C# as it is actually operating like a React JavaScript language, because we are in the React, we actually create a component and we use actually JavaScript as front-end language. But here in the as a front-end language, we are using the C# to display our data from API. And in the www root, there is the index.html. This is the landing page. It is loading first. This is the base href. And I have all the CSS, all the pages, all the Blazor components will be actually created under the pages. This is the basic structure actually for the Blazor component. And another thing that you have shown already, that you have seen, for example, this is the course. Just as a sample, what I did, I actually called on the initialization of this page, I created a public URL. I called a public URL and there I used the client. This is not the client factory. This is the client. And this is basically the default HTTP client. So you will use default HTTP client for any public URL or anything like that. And for the named, for your own API, you can actually use the named HTTP client. So for this, we have actually used HTTP client factory. And for this, we have actually used the HTTP client here. Simple client is used and calling the URL. Using this client, HTTP client, we are sending the request to the URL. And here we are using the client factory. So if I run this application again, so it is loading. This is the course. This is the branches that I just have shown. And this is the get course I have shown you. And this is another component, weather JSON. I have actually the JSON file inside the sample data. And in the component, this is the page route. And I have loaded data from this weather JSON and mapped the data in this class and showing this here. So this is the thing that is being shown in the application in total actually. So this is the weather that that I have shown. This is the course. This is the get course. Okay, I think you have understood. Later, if you want to see some database operation with Blazor by connecting to any database like MySQL or Microsoft SQL Server, you can comment, and I will extend this further. Thank you.